Hello, everyone. Thanks for joining. We're recording this session. The topic is cybersecurity, which is a really hot, very relevant topic, and a big one that's landing on the desk of CFOs and finance folks because it becomes a big risk for us. Cybersecurity insurance is becoming a new additional cost we're all concerned about. The integrity of our financial systems, really important. I don't know if you've done any wire transfers in the last couple of years. There's a huge risk when you send the wire confirmation information that gets hacked and intercepted. I've had that happen twice. One time we didn't catch it and $300,000 went to the wrong guy and we never got that back. In another case, it was a couple $1 million and we did catch, we're able to identify it as the instruction had been hacked and be able to avoid that misstep. But clearly it's something that we think about. And my understanding from our compliance team is that post the Russian invasion of Ukraine, cybersecurity activity has become even more active and more dangerous. So a lot of risks to understand. So really important topic. Thanks for joining us. And I'll turn it over to Jessica. Really appreciate you taking the time to share some insights on that. And I'll put myself on mute and let Jessica take over.
Great. Thanks everyone for joining today. So my name is Jessica Whitman. I'm a senior manager at Plante Moran. I lead our cybersecurity advisory services practice, which is a sub practice of our cybersecurity consulting. I do a whole host of different things with my clients, anywhere from helping them put together governance programs, policies and procedures for cybersecurity, security awareness training, incident response tabletop testing, just a whole wide range of things we do for our clients on my team. And today the topic is staying secure in a digital environment. So hopefully you learned a few things today that you might not have already known. So this is a pretty common screen people see now. It's the ransomware screen of death, we like to call it. No one wants to see this screen, but unfortunately with statistics and everything, the odds are that at least a few of us will. Right now, we always tell our clients it's not a case of if you're going to have ransomware or some sort of breach, but when, especially because the hackers are getting stronger and more skilled than ever. Motivated not only now by financial reasons, but political reasons. So there's a whole host of different motivators going on there. So just a few tidbits of industry news for you. 54% of organizations that were hit by ransomware in the last year said that the cyber criminals were able to encrypt their data, which means that they didn't have access to their data. It was fully encrypted. They couldn't do anything with their systems, which is pretty catastrophic if you think about it. The average ransom paid by mid-sized organizations was around $170,000. But that's just the ransom to get your information back. That's not the cost of all the downtime, cost of refortifying your systems, doing forensics, trying to figure out what happened. Only 65% of the encrypted data that was restored after the ransom was paid. So even if you are paying that ransom, it doesn't necessarily mean you're going to get everything back. The average bill for rectifying a ransomware attack, considering all the different factors, it's closer now, I think, to 3 million, but it was about 2 million last year. And then extortion style attacks, which is maybe they're not encrypting your data, but they're holding it until you do what they want or pay what they want. It's more than doubled in the last year. So the three most common attack vectors right now, so malware, ransomware, and passwords. So I'm sure you're familiar with all of these. I'll just go into some brief detail. Malware is software that's intended to damage, disable, or provide remote control over computer systems. Ransomware is software that's denying access to your system until ransom is paid. And then the way passwords are commonly an attack vector is sometimes using malware to install like a keystroke monitor or something like that, or just using algorithms in place to crack passwords. So that's the easiest way right now people are getting in. Another common trend right now is phishing. I'm sure everyone here is probably familiar with it, but it is the most common attack we see right now on my team. And the bad actors are getting more and more sophisticated with the emails they're sending, and they're sending them specifically to exploit vulnerabilities. So this is an example of one that was out during the pandemic from the CDC. It was someone posing as the CDC, sending emails with a link to click, and then that link will install malware onto the user's workstation, and then it propagates throughout the network. So being careful to understand what phishing emails look like, making sure your organization, all of your employees understand what it looks like, is really important. Some other popular attacks right now, there are variations of phishing, so we call them vishing and smishing. They're really popular, catchy names. Vishing is just like phishing, but it's a phone call instead of an email. I think we're all familiar with those. We've had clients get them from people posing to be their bank, asking them for their security passwords, or they need to give their social security number in order to get the right information. So I would say the biggest thing to avoid with these is just using your gut. If something doesn't feel right, it's probably not right. Some of our clients have had calls like that, and they just are like, it didn't sound like the bank normally did. There were a lot of long pauses. They didn't sound like they knew what they were talking about, things like that. Just use your gut here for the vishing, I would say. And then the smishing, I think we're all familiar. That's SMS text message phishing, basically. So instead of getting an email, you're getting a text that's encouraging you to click on a link or provide some sort of personal information. And Susie just referenced a situation like this. This is email account takeover. This is also something that I've been seeing a lot lately with my clients. So it usually starts with an account compromise. So the bad actor is using either malware, phishing, or maybe a weak password to get into the user's system. And then they start monitoring your email. So they might gather sensitive information. They're paying attention to how you're drafting your emails, learning communication styles, how the formatting is, finding money movement channels, things like that. They identify the best time to strike, and then they'll send a fake email with wire transfer instructions, maybe from an accounts receivable department or something like that. And then lo and behold, all of a sudden you're out hundreds of thousands of dollars wired to a number that was not the right one. And they've gotten really good at this. They'll put on, when we've done like forensics based on our clients, when they've had this happen, we've seen that they've been able to auto forward like every email to a separate account. So they're just constantly monitoring your email. They're deleting any messages from your sent folder, so you can't tell that they've been in there. And this is like a full-time job for these people. So as hard as we work at our jobs, they're working at this. So the bottom line is, why are we so vulnerable to all of these attacks? And the biggest thing I would say is right now, everyone is, human nature prefers convenience over security. So we're always trying to make things the easiest way to do them, the fastest. You order something from Amazon, it comes in 8 hours. Just as humans, that's what we want. And so when it comes to cybersecurity, we're doing what's more easy or convenient than necessarily what's secure. For example, like personal data, your passwords, your personal information, are you taking the extra steps to keep those secure? Are you using a different password for every account? Or are you using that same one over and over again because it's easy to type, easy to remember? You don't want to worry yourself with having to figure out password every time. Just an example of that. But overall, across organizations and in personal life as well, we're trying to keep things moving quickly. We don't want delays, so we do what's the fastest and not necessarily the most secure. So I'm going to go through some other kind of cybersecurity challenges we've been seeing. One of the biggest ones right now, and it's been now for a couple of years, is working from home. I think most organizations now either have gone fully remote, some have moved back to a hybrid approach. Less you're hearing about are actually in the office every day. And with that means insecure home networks. So people are connecting to Wi-Fi that's not secure. There's no insight on what your employees' home Wi-Fi is like. You don't have any visibility then into your endpoints because they're not connected. Corporate data might be saved on personal devices just for convenience because people are working at home. I talked about it just now, but the business email compromise, that's the email spoofing. They're getting better and better at this. And they're really targeting right now executive accounts too. So this is relevant to everyone here. Financial executives in particular, because they're the ones with access to approve things. So those email accounts are the most vulnerable. Another challenge right now for organizations is cyber insurance. So I'm sure you've heard of the popularity of cyber insurance now, but some of the issues are that the cyber insurance policies are really complicated. It's really hard to understand just by reading it, what it covers, what it means for your organization, what the coverage actually will entail, whether or not it's really going to be useful for you, whether or not the amount is even going to be enough if you had a breach. And then also the cyber insurance carriers are getting more and more picky about who they'll cover. And so they're requiring organizations to have a lot more controls in place. One example is multi-factor authentication. Pretty much the popular mode now with the insurance carriers is they're requiring organizations to have multi-factor authentication on every single account. So it used to just be, okay, maybe your VPN accounts or maybe some of your privileged administrative accounts, you need to have it. No, now they're saying everyone needs to have it on everything. And if you don't have it, they won't cover you. Some more challenges we've been seeing. IT hygiene overall, I think a lot of IT departments are just constantly putting out fires and they don't have necessarily the budget or time to really do things maybe the most secure way. I would say there's always issues with patching, configuration errors. They're trying to make things work for the business and maybe security isn't their main focus. Password hygiene. So we talked about this briefly earlier, but passwords are still really easy to compromise because overall, like, we prefer convenience. So we're doing something that's easy to remember. The problem is sometimes without even using some complicated algorithm to figure out your password, someone could just find your Facebook page and see what month you're born in, what your pet's name is, what your child's name is, where you live, all these things, and use all of that information to figure out what your password is. Right now, we're telling all of our clients that length matters the most. So I would say minimum 12 characters for any password is what we recommend now. Because really what matters the most is length. When they have these algorithm programs to crack passwords, they take the longest. It's like with each additional character, it's infinitely longer to crack that password. Reuse is another issue. So using the same password for like your personal email that you use for everything else, we definitely say don't do that. For personal use or for organizational use, password managers are a great solution. So you've probably heard of some of the applications like LastPass or Keeper. These are really great because they have an encrypted vault that keeps track of all of your passwords for every account you could ever have, because now you don't just have a few accounts, you have like 8 alone just to stream TV shows. So using that sort of mechanism, a password vault, is really helpful. It keeps you from reusing the same passwords over and over again. It'll create really complicated passwords that you don't necessarily have to enter. It links in your phone, so like it'll take you back to that application, make sure it's you using a couple of factors, and then fill in that password on your website or whatever. And then the other one is multi-factor. So if you're not already using multi-factor authentication at your organization, you should be. It's really the standard now, I would say. So at least 2 factors. Typically the most popular thing right now is getting a text message to your phone with like a code, and it has you input that code or clicking a link or something like that. So, and then detect and response is another big challenge I've been seeing. So you have ransomware, something happens at your organization, but you don't know what to do once you have it. Not having an incident response plan in place is surprisingly common. And it's honestly one of the biggest things you can do to have. So like I said before, it's not a question of if, but when you're going to have some sort of breach. So with that mindset, making sure your organization has an incident response plan. It doesn't even need to be like some long, complicated document. It really just needs to have the steps you would take in the case of an incident, who you would talk to, who's responsible, that kind of thing. Having anything like that in place will help you cut down time to respond to an incident, and it'll save you a lot of money. A couple more challenges, third-party risk. So more and more everyone's outsourcing IT to third parties. So maybe a managed service provider is handling some of your IT responsibilities. Making sure you're managing your vendors is really important with cybersecurity. Making sure that they have the right controls in place to protect your data, in addition to they're doing the right things for your system. Internet of Things is another popular one with Industry 4.0. Everything is more and more interconnected. So we're seeing risk from connected devices. I actually had a client once that got breached through their coffee maker because it wasn't hardened. They didn't have it locked down. It had Wi-Fi enabled, I think, and the password was the default password. So understanding even just what connected devices do you have to the internet? Are they all password protected? How can someone get into your network? And then lastly, but not least, is security awareness training. So that's a big issue right now too, because when we talked earlier about phishing, phishing emails are getting more and more hard to spot. So making sure that your users, who really are your biggest weakness, understand what a phishing email looks like, or what a phishing text looks like, or a suspicious email, doing testing regularly on those users to make sure they understand that is really important. Some more trends. So through 2020, from vulnerabilities exploited, well, let me start over. 99% of vulnerabilities exploited were known by security and IT professionals for at least a year before the breach happened. So like your IT department might have known of a vulnerable server, maybe it was an outdated operating system or something like that. And then they knew that for at least a year before maybe the server was breached. So understanding that you don't know what you don't know in this case. So we hear a lot of times, oh, my IT department, I trust them, they're doing a great job, but they said everything's great, but is it really great? How do you know it's great? What are they doing to make sure it's great? What are they doing to protect your systems? Are they keeping them updated? Things like that. Some more obstacles to stronger security. So we talked about all the other things going on, but I think the first one is really the most important here. Lack of skilled personnel, and that doesn't necessarily mean whether or not your IT department's skilled, but lack of people understanding basically what the threats are currently. Are your users trained against cybersecurity threats? Anyone that has access to your systems should be trained on cybersecurity, security awareness. So making sure that those users are trained at least annually, and then testing them more than often than that for phishing is what we recommend the most. So who is responsible for cybersecurity? We always say information security, it's not an IT issue anymore. It's a business-wide issue. So you need buy-in from every area of the organization. A lot of times what we see is, oh, well, we didn't patch this server because then it caused some other application to run slowly. So it caused an issue with the business, or we didn't put this security awareness and training in place because we didn't have time because we had to get something out the door. So understanding that security is important for everyone at the organization, not just IT. It's a business problem in this case. It's especially with Industry 4.0, everything's interconnected, so you can't avoid it. So what approach should you take for cybersecurity? Build your cyber and risk program around people, processes at your organization, and technology. First, you want to identify what you have, this first point. So a lot of organizations maybe know what kind of data they have. They know they have sensitive data. They know they might have PII. They might have account information, something like that. But do you know where it is in your system? That's one of the biggest issues we see. I perform a service called data mapping to some of my clients, where we go through every single department at their organization, and then within each department, every single process. And we document, okay, for this process, what data is used, where is it kept, what's any instance where it is in your system, what applications use it. And every single time we do one of these, we find that data is somewhere that no one had any idea that it was. And we find maybe that we found a couple of times that someone's been writing down credit card information and they shouldn't have been doing that. Maybe data is on some application that no one even knew that the organization was using, like some shadow IT. Maybe they're using like a cloud, personal cloud for something like Box or Dropbox. So you really need to first understand, where is your data? What data are you trying to protect? Most organizations invest the most right here in protecting. So like some of the things we talked about before, multi-factor authentication, firewalls, things like that. Recovery, we're not bad at still. We're better. We have backups in place. People are backing up to cloud applications, no longer using physical backups. I just talked about, do you know everything you're trying to protect? But then the biggest weakness right here, and I talked about this a little earlier, is the detect and response. So are you able to know if an attack even happened? A lot of times it takes at least, like, I think now they're saying 180 days from when maybe a breach might have happened to when it's found. If it's ransomware, that might be a little different because you obviously see that all of your stuff is encrypted, but other breaches a lot of times are not detected for maybe even 6 months. So were you able to detect an incident? And then how are you going to respond to it? Those are usually the two things that are the fall by the wayside, and unfortunately they're just as important as the others. So I'm going to go through some questions you should ask when you're thinking about cybersecurity at your organization. The first one is, are we properly identifying and managing risks and threats to your organization? So do you know what you're trying to protect? Do you know where it is in your system? And then if you realize you don't know where it is, how are you going to protect it? You can't protect your data unless you know where it is. And then doing a risk analysis of your organization is very important as well. I don't know why that. Okay. The next question is, are we compliant with our standards and regulatory requirements? This is really important now with all the different privacy regulations in place. I'm sure everyone here has heard about GDPR. More and more now, there's more states adopting privacy laws. So California has a couple different privacy laws in place. Colorado has some, and then we think basically eventually it'll be more of a standard among different states to have privacy regulations. So if you have employees that are residents in those states, are you complying with them, or do you have customers in those states that you're collecting information from? So understanding if you're complying with that, making sure you have the right governance and risk management processes in place, making sure you're documenting the right policies. So GDPR has requirements for privacy policies and privacy notification. Are you understanding that and doing that? And then are you monitoring your compliance with these things? So I've had a lot of clients in the last couple of years realize that maybe they are required to be compliant with GDPR. They didn't realize they had European customers or employees. And then the other one that's big right now is PCI. So are you processing credit cards at all at your company? If so, you need to understand if you need to be compliant with PCI. That's the payment card industry standard, where if you're processing over a certain volume of transactions, you need to be compliant. So those are a couple that are popular right now. The next question you should ask is, are our systems and networks secure and properly configured? And then the last part is, how do you know? So like I said before, are you just checking in with the IT and saying, how's it going? And they're saying everything's great. Or are you verifying in another way, maybe by a third-party assessment, or just internal audit, something like that, understanding that you have the right controls in place. So do you have the right cyber and technical safeguards? Things like multi-factor authentication, do you have the right physical safeguards? So are you locking up your information? It's surprising how many clients I've gone to where they maybe have a room full of servers and there's no lock on the door. So very basic, simple things like that. And then administrative safeguards. So are you segregating your access where you need to, for if you're doing different things in financially, or if you're developing software, do you have the right segregation? Do you have one person who has administrative access to everything, then no one else in your organization does? So if maybe that person, something happened to them, would you still be able to access information? Just thinking about those types of things. The next question you should ask is, are system access authorizations and privileges granted on a least necessary basis? So basically what we say in cybersecurity is that everyone should have the least amount of access possible. So I should have the minimum access that enables me to do my job. Based on job roles, you should be limiting access. So like the administrative assistant doesn't need access to a financial application, or maybe someone with access to that financial application needs only the minimum amount to do their job. They don't need everything. Making sure that you're using that principle of least necessary when you're granting access to people. And that's both physically and logically. So like I just said, you have privileged users, maybe that's someone with administrative access to an account, and you have standard users, making sure not everyone is privileged. It's surprising. I've had some clients where we'll look at their access lists and realize that they've got about 20 people with administrative access to an application for no necessary reason. So user access rights, similarly, making sure that maybe your users don't have administrative access to their desktop, so they can't just download software from wherever. Understanding the different access that your users have, and then reviewing that access regularly. Another question you should ask is, are you properly managing third parties? So I touched on this slightly earlier. That's basically your vendor management. Do you have third parties with access to your systems and information? If so, you should be actively managing them. 9 times out of 10, when we talk to clients, they say, no, we're not meeting with them regularly, but they always get in touch with us if something's wrong. And that's not really the approach you should take when they have so much access to your information. So there's a few things we recommend you do. First is due diligence. So before you onboard a new vendor, are you doing your proper due diligence on them? Are they financially solvent? Do they have a good reputation? Things like that. Contractual agreements, making sure those include things around information security. So we say, like, you should always have a right to audit your vendors. You should have service level agreements in place, business associate agreements similarly. Making sure that those third parties have cyber protection in place. So are you reviewing maybe their SOC 2 report, or are they ISO compliant, looking for evidence that they are taking cybersecurity as seriously as you are? And then oversight of third-party services. So it depends on the vendor, it depends on how sensitive information they have access to, but we usually say, like, you should be checking in with your vendors at least monthly, if not more, depending on the situation. And you should be reviewing them at least annually to make sure they're meeting all of your requirements. Next is, do you have the right IT strategy to support your business needs and infrastructure? So once you've figured out what you want to protect and where you have it and what kind of things you need to do to protect it, is this fitting in with your business needs? Are you using cybersecurity as part of your overall business strategy? Or are you focusing more on maybe just getting the product out the door, and cybersecurity is something that falls by the wayside? So understanding that, I mean, everything is digital now, Industry 4.0, everything's interconnected. Like I said, someone got breached by a coffee maker. My daughter has toys, she's 2, that can connect to the internet. So it's just, everything is a vector to be attacked by. So understanding that your business is taking those things into account, keeping up with basically industry standards and understanding what the next thing on the horizon is. And then finally, are you receiving periodic communication and updates on your cybersecurity program? So if you're not directly involved in managing your cybersecurity program, there needs to be someone at your organization who is, whether that's IT or you have like a risk and compliance group or something like that. No matter what, you should have an idea of what's going on there, what controls are in place, and if they're keeping track of them regularly. You should be receiving updates and knowing what kind of things are going on. So basically with cybersecurity, I've said it before, but you prepare for when and not if. Everyone has things happen to them. I know people that have had personal ransomware happen, professional ransomware. I would say over half of my clients have had ransomware within the last 3 years. So, and these are the main things to think of with everything going on right now. Preparation, so preparing your organization for the next attack, being able to detect something if it happens, being able to understand what happened, and then finally recovering from it. And just understanding you can apply this to your personal life as well. So making sure that you're prepared for the next phishing or smishing or whatever you want to say. And keeping all of your passwords secure, just doing as much as you can to feel like you're protecting yourself right now, because it is a really unpredictable time. So that's the end of my presentation. But we have some time, so I'd be happy to take any questions.
I wonder if Jessica, thank you so much for that overview. That was pretty thorough and thoughtful. I'll see if there's any questions. I've comments. No,
I don't. I don't have any question. I have a comment on multi-factor authentication. So very often these days, and I've spoken to insurers, very often these days, this is a condition precedent for even considering issuing the insurance. So unless you have multi-factor authentication in your systems, you won't get any cybersecurity insurance closed. And then if they can prove later on that MFA was not working 100% of the time, they will deny the claim. Actually, there's this big, I just read in the news today, there is this big fight in courts right now between travelers and a company that suffered a cyber attack in the recent months, a ransomware. And travelers denied them insurance because they found, or they allege they found, that at the point of signing the insurance contract, the company misrepresented that they were using multi-factor authentication. So I don't know the exact details, whether or not this is an empty allegation and insurers just don't want to pay out, but cyber insurance is very, very tricky thing because it's expensive, and then there are so many loopholes for the insurers to walk away from it that it rarely makes sense unless you're a very, very big company with fat budgets.
It froze. Is it just frozen for me?
Not for me. I'm okay.
Jessica?
Oh,
Can
yeah.
you hear me?
You're breaking up a little.
Susie, you're breaking up.
Froze.
Susie,
Oh,
from
sorry.
our point of view,
sorry.
you froze.
Sorry, please go on without me. So
Okay. Are there any other questions or comments?
I took my video off just in case that might help the bandwidth. Jessica, will you be sharing this with us? And is it okay for us to share the presentation with the folks that may have registered and been unable to attend today?
Yeah, I'll be providing a version of the presentation afterwards.
With your contact information in case people want to follow up to see if they can get your help. That would
Yep,
be great.
and my contact information is up right now too, but I will include it in the presentation as well.